YouTube guys, what's up? I'm going to walk you through another analog poster design that I've created recently using a few different materials, one of them being vellum. So it's this kind of semi-transparent paper that you can use to create some overlay effects. So I've printed these two together, added some scans to kind of create this interesting frosted glass kind of anonymity themed poster design. So let's jump straight into Photoshop and I will walk you through it. Now guys, here is my final poster design. Now this is called Identity Crisis and it's based off of this kind of abstract image I found on Unsplash of this man with a hidden face. Now I wanted to really build into this idea of anonymity and create the poster themed around that. So with all of these layer effects on, this is the final outcome I've created with this kind of semi-visible character in the back and some interesting modern shapes and type. Using physical materials is always amazing when you print and scan something in to get texture. So you can see as I zoom in, there's a variety of kind of cool textured effects here. A little bit of depth with these lighter outlines and then this grain feature kind of across the whole piece. So let's jump into a new canvas and start working through it. So we're going to come up to File, New. We're going to use these settings just here, which are my standard for all of my poster work. 3840 width by 4800 height and 300 resolution. Now I'm going to bring in the image here that I've selected. Now I've sourced this from Unsplash and I will link the original image in the description below if you want to use it. So I'm going to drag this up to the top end and I'm going to start cycling through a few grid options for me to use. So I'm going to come up to View, Guides and New Guide Layout. And I'm going to use this 3x3 preset that I have created. Now I've got a whole bunch of presets coming out for you guys soon. So keep an eye out on my page and I will be announcing it. So I'm going to use this preset and I'm going to start working in the main title, which is going to be Identity. And the typeface I wanted to use was a Brutalist typeface, tall and narrow and bold, which is Chabot extra condensed. Now I'm going to make sure that this is capitalized and I'm going to opt for a light cream color. So I'm going to go into this kind of orange hue just here, drag it near the top left but not quite in there, and then select just there. I'm going to make sure that my tracking is set to optical, or my kerning, sorry, and then make sure this is centered and scale this up to fit the margin bounds. Now this is a standard in my work in terms of style. I always like to go for quite a large bold title, and then from this point with identity in, I wanted to work in the word crisis to fit within the titles. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, type in crisis, and I'm going to start cycling this down using the golden ratio. So I'm going to go into my type point size and type /1.618, which is going to divide it by the golden ratio. So I'm going to keep scaling this down and I'm going to center this and then drag this over. So now I'm going to use the rectangle tool to form a shape around the outline of crisis here. So let me just hide the word identity and I'm going to form a basic rectangle just around it. I'm now going to select both of these, align them both vertically and horizontally just to make sure that they are aligned with each other, and then drag them back into place. Now with this rectangle, I want to curve the edges just here. So I'm going to unclick this chain. I'm going to set the left, top and bottom to 0 pixels, and I'm going to curve the right edges as they will be the only ones that are visible. So I'm going to set that to 50, command click on the outline of this, and then mask it on our identity layer. Invert this to reveal it. And now you can see we have the word crisis fit within the title. I'm now also going to chop out this area of masking, or what I might do is increase the size of crisis just slightly and now add some masking area, or unclip this mask just here, use the arrow keys and just shift it across a little bit and then extend it. Now this is going to make sure that there's no weird spacing within the title. So when we zoom out, it fits in much better. I'm going to make sure to reclip my mask there just for future use. And now I'm going to work in some supporting text, which is going to be my name, year, and title. So once again, I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to remove the mask and I'm going to change this typeface to just condensed, not extra condensed. Now this is going to add a slight bit of contrast and make it a little bit easier to read at smaller sizes. Now I want to set that to 30 and not 3. So I'm going to type in my name and I'm going to open up my margins, make sure that this is all correctly aligned. There we go. Duplicate this, drag one over to this side. I'm going to change this to poster design, and then in the center we can use our center align tools and center justify, and I'm going to put the year. So now this is the main bulk of type complete, and now I'm not really worrying about adding too many digital effects to this because when I print it and scan it in, that's going to create most of the texture that I'm looking for here. Now I'm going to add just a bit of body text as well. So using these grid lines, we've got these 3 columns set up. So I'm going to add in a text box just here and align it to my grid. Now I'm going to copy in the body text I've been using on the previous poster design, or on the original, sorry. So let's paste in this second box here, create a duplicate, move it over to the 3rd column, paste in that 3rd column, and there we go. Now when I hide our grid lines, you can see we've got 3 perfectly sized width-wise boxes, as well as they've got the same height and width going the whole way across. So now I'm going to set these into a group, and name these body text. The only formatting I've done for these is change the typeface and make them justified on both sides so that they fit the width perfectly. Typeface I'm using for this is Podium Sharp, semi-bold. Now there's a variable feature here where you can change the weight and the width. I've gone for 600 weight, 100 width. Now I'm just going to group my layers here, name this subheaders. Then we've got identity and crisis can stay there. I'm going to remove the rectangle layer and just rename this to image. So at this point I wanted to add in some sort of grid accentuating element, so maybe some small squares, just to add this kind of modern touch to it. So I'm going to open up my grid lines, get the rectangle tool and create some small squares just in these grid line gaps. I'm going to make sure that the fill color is set to the recent ones so that it is the same as every other aspect of text here. Create some duplicates and then drag them into these grid lines here. Every time I make a duplicate, make sure to re-highlight all of them and it will significantly speed up your process. Copy those last 4, drag them over, and there we go. Now we've got some nice kind of grid accentuating elements. I did have them slightly smaller in my original, but I actually quite like the increased size. Now I can just group those and name them squares. Now to fit into the theme, I wanted to add some sort of doodle element over the eyes of the character, just to kind of really push the idea of anonymity and not really understanding your identity. So within my assets, I have a doodle image that I use from Design Syndrome, which is this just here, which is really cool. He's got this doodles pack, which I will link in the description below, with a lot of drawn out assets similar to this. So I thought this would be a good asset to incorporate, layer just over the eye simply like that. And this already has a color overlay of the same color, but make sure to add that in. I will just adjust it to make sure that they are all aligned. And there we go. So I did play around with a few options for this, but I've realized that this was the clearest. If I added it on the other eye, it's not really the same effect. And now I wanted to create some more complexity around this typographic header just here. So I was playing around with some script fonts. So I just typed in Crisis again, made sure I typed it correctly capitalized. And one of the script fonts that I ran into was Sloop Script Pro. And I noticed that when this is capitalized, it's got this really intricate look to it. And I wanted to make sure that this was set on metric. And I thought that this could be a cool visual element without necessarily needing to be readable. Now this can add into the kind of confusion theme in the poster and the actual subject that we're covering here. So with this crisis word, I then thought, let's go for a different color to add a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to use the eyedropper and set that to a red just here. Now, just to help with visibility, I'm going to add in an inside stroke using an eyedropped black color from the image. Set the stroke size to maybe 2 or 3. I'm going to stick with 2 for the moment. Now with this, I'm layering it underneath everything apart from the image. Now, I thought that somehow behind this header could be an interesting effect. And I noticed that when I dragged it around in terms of contrast and readability, I really liked this placement just here. And I thought to make this more intricate, I could add some individual masking layers to reveal certain stems of the text shapes in front and behind of the headline. So to do this, I'm just going to grab Crisis here, make sure that it is under the identity layer. I'm going to command click identity and then command option click on Crisis. And it's going to remove that mask, and I'm going to invert this. And now when I paint in the mask on our identity layer, it's going to reveal these stems only within the bounds of the text. So you don't need to worry about going over the lines. So just there, I'm going to draw in some features, maybe draw this one overhead, make some stems overlay and make some hide behind the text. Now this just adds in that layer of complexity to it. I'm going to add in this area here and that area there. And there we go. Now it's kind of interweaved within the headline. It looks a lot more deliberate and I think adds a nice modern touch to the poster. So now with all of our type layers completed, we can move on to printing. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, I'm using vellum, which is this kind of translucent paper that lets light through that it can allow you to print onto other materials. So you can see how I've structured it here. I've printed the type onto this layer and the image onto some plain paper. And now with this, I've layered them together, scanned them back in, and I'm going to show you the outcome. So now with all of the layers printed and scanned back in, I'm going to paste in the scan that I created with my printer. So now, before I went to print this, I made sure that I had hidden the image layer and I had turned every aspect of this creamy color here into black. Now the reason I did this is because I intended on using a gradient map to overlay it and invert it. So I had to make sure that the colors were all inverted beforehand. So you can see I've got this red still here as a little bit of difference, but everything else that was in this white cream color is now black. So you can see the effect is really cool. It adds this nice analog texture. It's got this almost sandy, grainy look the whole way across, and it adds this cool effect on the edges of the text. It creates almost like an ink bleed by itself, which is perfect and what I'm looking for, and you can see these faint scan lines going across as well. So now I'm going to make sure that this is all centered, and I'm going to line this up as best I can to the original. Now, a good thing to do is to open up the grid and just try and align the assets with where they were. It's not going to be perfect again because of the nature of the scan, but for now, this is pretty good. This is probably about as aligned as I'm going to get. If I try and move it a little bit more to that side of my arrow keys, I'm going to see some white lines down the side. So now from this point, it's just adjusting it digitally to be ready to post. So I'm going to group every other layer and just name this layers and hide this. And now we're going to apply everything to this scan layer. First thing I'm going to do is add a hue saturation layer. I want to increase the saturation slightly to make that red pop through a bit more. And I'm also going to decrease the lightness just slightly, maybe to -5. After this, I can add in some curves. Now this is going to help balance this kind of frosted background against the dark text. I'm going to make the blacks slightly darker by dragging the low end down slightly. I'm also going to drag the mids down, which is going to add more kind of reveal to the background, and then increase these lights for more contrast. And there we go. Already this looks really cool, like he's behind a physical sheet. Now from this point, this is when I added in the gradient map. And from here, you can go for whatever color you like. So I reverse this, and you can see immediately it's adding this light text against this dark kind of abstract figure in the background. So I knew that I wanted the dark background with the light text. So then it's just playing around with specific gradient maps. So I'd cycle through some of my presets I have, and I ended up creating this one. So if I was to set this back to kind of where it was, I can show you how I've gone about creating this. So this is going from a dark gray to that creamy white that we were using before. So I wanted to drag the black end in just to really increase that contrast and make the majority of the background black. Now, drag the lights in to harshen it even more. And then because we're using two slightly different shades of gray, it adds more difference between the colors in the text, which just adds that finer detail. From this point, it's just fine adjustments and making sure that nothing is too harsh. I think there is pretty much perfect. So I can hit OK on that. And now as we zoom in, you see all of this fine detail and texture, which is much harder to mimic digitally. It's always amazing when you use physical materials. And I'm trying to experiment a lot more with different kind of materials in my work that I can show here on YouTube. So yeah, but this is the final design. I'd love to know what you think, so leave it in the comments below. And thank you guys for watching. Now guys, as always, thank you so much for making it to the very end. I hope that you can find something in this video useful that applies to you, that you can learn for your own design process. Now, if you want to see a few more videos from me, there's going to be a lot more on my channel and two either side of me just here. So go ahead and watch them, and I will see you over there.